Find it. Thanks, everyone. Thank you so much for being here to talk about one of my favorite subjects, artificial intelligence. It's something that terrifies me. Dave Nicholas just introduced me, but I'm Liza Long. I'm the Academic Technology Program Manager for the Idaho State Board of Education. I'm also a CWI English instructor and an ISU English PhD student. So between work, teaching, and being in a graduate school program, I feel like I pretty much have all my bases covered for interacting with AI. But I really appreciate you all being here tonight, or if you're watching the recording. First thing I want you to know is if you're feeling a little overwhelmed, you're not alone. We saw another big model shift just at the end of last week, and I kind of spent the weekend screaming into the void. So if that was you as well, that's kind of where we're at. But I do want to talk today. I generally am a little more positive or bullish about the potential for AI, and I have put this link in the chat, but I like to share resources through slide decks. In fact, um, I might even end up beefing up this slide deck with a few more things, but if you like to follow along, that would be a good thing for you to do. So, as I was thinking about what I wanted to share with our amazing dual credit instructors today, you all are really on the front lines of this. And, if you're teaching, whatever year you're teaching, from ninth grade to seniors, your students have had access to this technology since 2023, 2024. So, students are using it. We'll talk a little bit more about how and why students are using it later in the presentation. But the model I'd like to present to you tonight, I think it's completely understandable if you want to run screaming from the room every time you hear AI. I get it. Like I said, kind of have these occasional existential freakouts around these technologies. But the reality is it's here, it's changing things very quickly, and it's absolutely changing the nature of what we do in the classroom. I want to suggest some ways we might think about generative artificial intelligence in terms of assessment. So I've titled this presentation Minus AI, Plus AI, and Times AI. And this was not my idea. I got this idea from UC Berkeley professor Greg Niemeyer, who's an artist as well. And I heard Greg speak at the OpenAI Educator Forum back in October of 2025. This approach really resonated with me because it helped me to think about my own classes and my own assessments and where I actually needed to pull AI out and how I needed to explain that to students. So I think I was already doing a pretty good job, honestly, with the plus and times AI. But I want us to kind of use that framework as we have this conversation tonight. So these are my learning objectives, and full disclosure, all the art in this presentation was created by Google Gemini. If you're playing around with Gemini right now, there have been a lot of changes with Gemini as well. I was just explaining to Dave as we came in, I'm kind of annoyed because it has this new beautify button, which is lovely, and it will beautify your slides. How kind. But what it does is it creates an image of your slide that's not accessible. And right now, a big focus, a part of my work with AI has been accessibility. So if you're thinking about Title II compliance or accessibility and you want to follow up with me, I have a lot of ideas in that space right now. But yeah, I think it's ironic that like sometimes we get these fixes and then it's not really that much of a fix from AI because it's just not even accessible. So I have not used the beautify, but I have used the image generation. You can kind of see how AI might be used. Also, full disclosure, this slide deck was also prepared by Gemini. And it wouldn't create the actual slide deck, but it created the content for the slide deck based on a blog post that I, a human, actually wrote. So I've linked to the blog post later, but I knew this was kind of the framework I wanted to do, and I wanted it translated into a presentation. Linked to that in Gemini, bam, had my slide deck. So I do look through all this stuff. I change things up. I've wordsmithed these learning objectives, but when we think about how AI is used in the workplace, I go ahead and share that with you right up front because I use AI every single day with everything that I do. And creating a presentation from something I've already written is a really like a no-brainer. I wouldn't even think at this point about going in and creating a presentation on my own. That's how much things have shifted for me. So my goals are we're going to look at the AI divide. It exists, and whichever side of you're on, there's not a right or wrong side. There are sides. We'll look at that minus, plus, and times framework, thinking about places we need to subtract AI, where we might consider adding AI, or where we can really up our game by multiplying what students are capable of doing with AI. I'll give you some examples. We'll look at AI vulnerable assignments with more personalized prompts. I think a lot of the folks who are here, I know, Lindy, you're good at this because I've gotten to work with you. So some of you are already really good at this stuff. And if you have ideas, feel free to, or resources, feel free to share them in the chat. Dave and I can follow up with you afterwards. And if you have questions as I go ahead and put those in the chat too. We'll have time to answer questions at the end. The next point I want to look at is moving away from how do we stop students from using AI to how do we cultivate critical AI literacy. And for me, at least, as someone who's taught writing for a long time, I do see our role in first year writing as shifting from writing essays to AI literacy. That's me, but and yes, it's a little painful for me, but I do see that shift. I think the more we think about the potential there, frankly, the more useful we make ourselves in whatever this new academic environment looks like. And then finally, human in the loop. It's always got to be the human in the loop. And I've been thinking a lot about this again with my little existential breakdown last weekend where I realized, oh, AI is actually really better at writing than really humans are at this point. And if you're thinking, no, ChatGPT, you're still using the free version of ChatGPT. You're not using paid premium models. It's really good. It's really good at writing now. And so if AI owns that space, if writing was thinking, what does it mean for us to be human? How do we shape our sense of meaning and our sense of identity? And how do we teach students to do that in what are frankly very unsettling times? So big goals, but this is kind of gives you an overview of what we're looking for in this presentation. And again, if you have ideas or thoughts, go ahead and put those in the chat. So I want to address the AI divide right up front. And I'm experiencing this as a student. So I'm not just speaking to you as a professor here, I'm speaking to you as a student. We are right now in the middle of two extremes sometimes in our classes. We have professors who are completely banning AI, no AI ever for any reason. Why would you even do that? I seriously had one of my professors in the syllabus, it said, you are an English graduate student and like 5 exclamation points. Okay. Yeah, why would you use AI? I can't think of a reason. But then also I have professors who've experimented with it and tried to see where it might be useful. And that was the approach I took as a professor as well, thinking, well, what can we do with this new tool? So I'm curious, and maybe you guys can share in the chat, where are you at with that AI divide? Are you completely banning it, trying to completely ban it? Are you totally embracing it, or are you somewhere in the middle with these things? You can take time while I talk, but I'd love to see you guys share, if you don't mind, kind of where you're at with that AI divide. Sometimes when I present on this, and I'll use this language again in the presentation, I talk about cyborgs. That's me, someone who's like all in with AI. Centaurs, those are people who are delineating certain tasks to AI and then keeping some tasks to human work. And then resistors who are really actively resisting AI. I think that's a valuable and important ethical stance. So you might see these same types of attitudes from your students as you look at how they're using it. Not seeing stuff in the chat, but I would really love for you guys to share. So just to kind of frame Lindy said in the middle. Yeah, using as a writing tutor. Yeah, that's great, Lindy. That's a great place to start. But we're hearing a lot of words being thrown out. We're hearing things like agents, and I am doing a lot of work with agentic browsers right now. So we hear things like prompt engineering. We hear this terminology that sometimes feels a little off-putting, and it feels like it's gatekeeping and saying you're not really welcome into the conversation. And I heard just a fantastic talk. This would be great for your students, by the way, so I've linked to it. This was at the Davos World Economic Forum a couple of weeks ago in January of 2026. And Noah Yuval Harari, who I really like, I've liked all of his books, Sapiens, Homo Deus, Nexus is the one that kind of looks at AI. he really outlined the difference between AI, 'cause sometimes we hear AI is a tool. He says, no, AI is not a tool. AI is an agent. And the way he explained that is that, a knife is a tool. So I can decide with a knife to go chop some lettuce, or I can decide to stab someone, right? That's my choice. I'm using the tool, the knife. But for AI is actually a knife that can decide for itself whether it wants to chop lettuce or murder someone. And that really drove it home for me. I thought, yeah, that's the technology that we're dealing with. So when you think about how this is maybe more than a tool or a calculator, I think it's important to keep that in mind that this really is change. So this is a quote from me. I'm not popular for saying this, but I do believe it. I think the research paper and frankly, the college essay is dead as an assessment method. But that does not mean I think writing in the humanities are dead. I just think we really are at a point where we need to rethink our assessments and what they look like in the age of generative AI when it can write a great paper, right? So that's the AI divide that I'm talking about. Here's the framework that I want to use as we think about our own assessments today. And again, this is from Professor Greg Niemeyer. So he talked about places we should be thinking about subtracting AI to recover more human presence. Then he talked about places where we should be adding AI to expand possibility. And kind of what I'm seeing in the chat, I think is a good example of plus AI, where we're bringing it in as a writing coach or a writing tutor, for example. That to me seems like plus. Then there's the really fun part, and this is what a lot of my job is. It's the times AI. This is where we bring in artificial intelligence to completely turbocharge our own creativity and the way that we're making connections and learning. All of them have their place, I would say, in the assessments and in our classrooms, if you're willing to teach with AI. Again, if you're still on that side of the AI divide where you're resisting, that's, I think, a valid ethical choice. It's going to be a difficult one, though. I'll say that. I don't think these tools are going away. So I'd love for you to think about the work you assign. Are there places right now where you really need students to work without artificial intelligence? And if that's the case, how are you communicating the importance of that human work to them? What's your why? Right? I'll give you an example. I thought this was kind of funny. I took philosophy of language last semester. It's honest to goodness the hardest class I've ever had in graduate school. It was so hard. The philosophy folks, Dave, you'll laugh about this, right? Like when we think about philosophy of language, we might think about Foucault or Derrida. The philosophy folks don't see them as like sufficiently rigorous philosophers, so we didn't even touch those guys. They were like, oh yeah, that's for the English folks. We don't even care about that. So it's like Wittgenstein, Bertrand Russell, Frege on sense. It was a hard class, and I was not familiar with a lot of the work in that class. Well, my teacher was using version history with Google Docs to make sure that we were doing our own work. And he made it really clear, no AI in the class ever for any reason. And here's how I'm going to catch you if you use AI. So I tried to be kind of nice about it, but I emailed him early on and I was like, oh, version history, that's very cute. I totally know how to get around that. I could absolutely get around version history if I wanted to as a student. So, professor, I would like you to explain to me why I should do this work. you know, Hopped into office hours. We talked it through. He convinced me I should do my own work. And then he brought that to the class. And to his credit, he was very humble about it. He's like, I took this punitive mindset toward AI. That's not what I should have done. I should have centered you as humans and explained to you why your human work was important in the class. So I think, thinking about how we frame these conversations, are we trying to catch people? Are we the AI police? Who has time for that, right? But if we're trying to nurture student growth and explain to them how friction is important to their learning, we can get their buy-in. There's always going to be cheaters, but if you can explain the value of the assignment without AI, stop worrying about the cheaters and just focus on your students who really want to do their best work. So make sure you're communicating that when you have a minus AI framework. Similarly, where could AI right now maybe enhance your student work? You guys are already playing around with that. I love that. Are you asking your students this? Your students are pretty good with AI at this point. Some of them are terrible. Honestly, it's weird to see. But ask them how are they using it to enhance their work? They might have ideas you haven't even thought of, right? So bringing your students into the conversation, making it clear you're aware of these technologies, and maybe open to it. Um, the final point, where could AI be a force multiplier? I got to experience this firsthand as a teacher when I taught a class I've created called English 199, Writing in the Age of Generative AI. And in that class, I expected the students to use AI for every part of the class. That was the assignment. The writing they were being graded on was their prompting and also the way they were visioning or scaffolding their projects. But they had to choose very difficult projects for this class. I had one student who created an entire small business, including coding the website in the class with AI. All of the social media content, all of the images that she needed. It wrote a business plan for her. Like she leveraged every part of it to create a small business in my class, which, not many of us can create a small business in one semester while we're balancing other classes. So think about that to me as a great example of a force multiplier. I want to drill down into the minus AI just a little bit more. And I have to tell you, this is really where I'm thinking. This is the space I'm in. Um, so there's, if you're teaching in person, we're seeing a lot of this right now. There are easy ways to make this happen. Blue books, right? Bring back the blue book, have them write an essay in class, have them talk about ideas in class. But we really struggle in asynchronous online courses. And so in my current role as academic technology program manager, I've been exploring ways that we can kind of preserve the academic integrity of the asynchronous online environment. Some of you teach, I think, like at IDLA, so you know what I'm talking about. I would say that really at its base level, our surveillance tools right now are our best bet. If this is really important and you need to see the student writing, um, that's one way to do it, right? You can also, I have a professor who has us write things out by hand and then take pictures of them and turn them in. That's something you could do, but the student could have AI write it first and then just copy it. So still maybe copying it, they would learn something, right? So thinking about that piece of it, I think can be kind of difficult. And my own bias in this area in minus AI is toward convincing the student, like my professor convinced me that I should do my own work. I think that's really where we make the strongest case. We're really clear on why AI should be removed, and we're really clear on communicating the value of that to our students. So think about your own assignments and where are the places you really need AI out of the picture and why? Why do you need AI out of the picture there? In my mythology class right now, it was just last semester, I got the horrible AI written stuff. You know what I'm talking about. And so I just created a new rubric and I shared the Wikipedia article on telltale signs of AI writing. And I just told the whole class, I was like, I don't really care whether you used AI or not. If your writing reads like this, I don't want to read it. I'm bored. So even if you didn't use AI, if your writing reads like this, I don't want it. So that was actually helpful because they had a model, like maybe they were just better at prompting AI, but they had to think about the rhetoric and about the situation, and that was probably good for them. So if you guys have ideas for this too, for minus AI, either places you think that we need to take AI out of the picture or strategies that you have for doing that, I would love to see those. We can share them out. I'm going to move on to plus AI. And I think, I saw some good examples in the chat, like using it as a writing tutor. I've got quite a bit of experience with that. I did IRB research on English 102 with this, and I found that it was helpful. It was especially helpful for the academic research paper that I had them write. It was less helpful, but still somewhat helpful for persuasive argument. It actually hurt them on their creative assignment. That was strange to me to find that, but AI was not helpful to them on their they do a writing in my field where they can do like a blog post or a podcast or something fun that's a multimedia. The students who used AI, it actually hurt them on that. Their grades were lower. So, and in my class, how did I know? Because they were expected to use AI and tell me when they used it. But I think a great example of a plus AI, in addition to the one shared in the chat, like writing coaches for formative assessments, would be maybe using a deep research tool. I'll make sure I add this. I like Google's deep research for this, especially you could create like an assignment in Notebook LM coupled with deep research where students find their own sources maybe, but then they interact with them in Notebook LM. That I like that myself as a student. I generally have gotten permission to do that, even with my teachers who are like, "Oh, you can't use AI." I'll say, "Well, what about this?" And some of my professors have then gone on to use that for their own articles, that methodology where they create a Notebook LM and then bring some stuff in. But I think this can be fun, but it's humans are very much in the center. And then it's just kind of using our research tools. It's like EBSCO on steroids, right? Some of the stuff we can do there. So that might be something to consider. And again, I'd love to see your ideas in the chat. The final one is where I think we just can have some fun. And this is that times AI piece. So I shared the example of the student who created the business plan, but this again involves communicating the value of AI to your students. So what we are seeing already in the workforce is that those beginning level, the entry level positions, they're disappearing, right? What does that mean for our students? Well, it means that they need to figure out how to upskill fast. So I think it was Dennis Hassibis, Davos Economic Forum again. He said, if he were a student right now, or if he were a professor, he would be telling his students to get as good at these AI tools as possible, as quickly as possible. And not every professor feels like that's the right approach. I've taken that approach myself with my students. Let's get really good at this. But what do we mean by really good? We mean getting it to help you learn faster and learn more. So as an example of that I did as a student, I created ChaucerBot. ChaucerBot was really fun. We didn't actually have to read our text in Middle English, which was shocking to me. Coming out of classics, we had to do everything in Latin and Greek. But I wanted to read in my medieval English class. I wanted to read the text in Middle English, and I wasn't good enough. So ChaucerBot did not translate for me. I translated, and it corrected me, tracked my errors, and kind of made it fun for me to learn. I created ChaucerBot myself, so I had to show my knowledge of text. I had to train it on text. And just even that act of doing that helped me to understand Middle English better. I'm doing the same thing in my Old English class, again, with my teacher's permission. He thinks that's a fun use of AI, and it's definitely improved my abilities. So asking your students how they might use AI to upskill themselves or get better at the work or do harder work, I think is something that would be really useful for them at this point, since we are already seeing the workplace expecting this from students. Again, ideas, feel free to share them. But so that's the framework. Those are things I want you to think about. But I also want to drill down a little bit into why our students are using AI. And here I am relying on some work from some of my fellow ISU graduate students, Suhaib, Ifi, and Manaz. They're cited there, and I've linked to the overview of their study in the presentation they gave to ISU. What they found in really focus grouping and asking students is that really AI misuse is often a problem with the assignment design rather than students necessarily wanting to cheat. And I think we all kind of know what that might look like. So for these three colleagues of mine, any kind of generic prompt that you have just actually kind of begs for automation. I was joking with Manaz. I was like, so basically, if I give a boring writing assignment, I should expect the students to use ChatGPT. And she's like, basically, yeah, that's what we found. That puts the onus back on us of really creating engaging assessments and communicating the value again. But that's what my colleagues found in their research. So then they talked to professors, and they also did some research to consider how we can move beyond that boring writing, the writing that students find boring, the writing that we find boring to read, right? And many of you are already doing this by personalizing prompts to individual student experiences. I will tell you, because again, I'm a student and I use AI a lot, I can get some great reflective writing out of AI. I really can. So I do think it still goes back to communicating the value. But certainly I've heard from students that if they feel that they're engaged with the prompt, they'll take it more seriously and they're more likely to want to write that themselves. Scaffolding the writing process was another thing that my colleagues suggested and that I found in my own work. So have them show their work. I like to use generative AI a lot in this scaffolding phase. I like it for formative assessment. It can provide such robust feedback compared to what I have time and energy to provide. So as long as I communicate the value of that to students and to also teach them to push back, I really like that aspect of formative assessment where, you train them to say, well, actually, Gemini or Claude or ChatGPT, I think that's a terrible idea. I would much rather do it my way. Like encourage that, reward that kind of behavior. Maybe even in some of the assignments I gave, I made students push back on something or find something they didn't think was that great. That teaches critical AI literacy. As we know, there's issues with these things. They still hallucinate. They will always hallucinate. They make stuff up, basically. So getting students to learn to be skeptical and critical through that process, I think that can be a very valuable teaching process for students with AI. And then finally, I've seen a lot of success with this with instructors in various ways. When we ground tasks in local or contextual material, it can still be difficult for LLMs to easily replicate it. Like Dave, you mentioned I taught literary analysis. If I were still teaching it, I would probably have the students work on each other's short stories, right? Rather than analyze a short story. Like I'd take, if they were in your fiction class or had taken your fiction class, I would have them analyze those short stories rather than something that's the yellow wallpaper or whatever, right? So that can be just a different way of thinking about it. By the way, the AI still can't analyze, right? But it just feels a little more local and contextual, and students feel more engaged, I think, when we do that kind of work. Again, I'd love your strategies for this, but I felt like my colleagues did a pretty good job with this stuff as they looked at ways to kind of AI proof our writing classes. So now I'm back to me and what I'm hoping for. I do think the future that I hope we're building towards is this idea of AI literacy. And again, I don't think we're going to be able to ban these bots. So we actually have a very unique position. We touch most of the students in our respective schools. Those of you who are teaching high school English classes, you have a really unique opportunity to shape how students interact with these tools for the rest of their lives. So focusing on when and why, I feel like that can just be so powerful for students, and getting their input on that as well, right? Like it can feel a little strange at first if you're not used to like co-creating knowledge or being a co-learner with your students, but that's if we're being realistic, that's kind of the world we're in right now. Like none of us are experts at AI. And so we do have to learn along with our students. And I think showing that humility and even that vulnerability, even some of your frustration about or sense of loss and grief about what we're losing through this process, I think those can all be very powerful messages for students. So I don't know if I'll get my vision, but I think there is a utopian outcome for all of this. It's possible. And for me, with higher education, that would look like us sitting under a tree reading and discussing meaning, but being able to just have those conversations at a much higher level because we've used that multiply AI mindset where we just can have students do much harder things and have much harder discussions. Um, that's I don't know. It may not end up that way. And frankly, like where I mentioned my existential crisis, like really, I don't think these large language models are going to be the path to artificial general intelligence, but I used to think that this AGI stuff everyone talks about was very far off, and I don't think that anymore. And I also don't think that we as a society are ready for it. So being a safe place for your students as things just are so they're moving so quickly, they're changing so quickly. It's hard for us, but it's also really hard for them, right? A lot of the old world is dying, and we don't know what will replace it. So that it feels like a particularly vulnerable time, I guess, for us to be working with these students. But certainly, if we can model ethical approaches to these tools, if we can demonstrate for them the value of human thinking and the value of human reading and writing, how those activities are still important, I think we're doing them a huge service right now for helping them to think about how we'll construct meaning in a world where, frankly, machines will very likely be smarter than we are. That's not something our species has faced, right? So I've always liked sci-fi, but man, it's weird to live it. It's really weird to live with it. I jammed through a lot of stuff really quickly there. I was hoping we would have some time for some questions and a little more interaction, but I'd love to kind of hear your thoughts. Just as a summary, I hope as you're thinking about assessment and what you can bring to your students, you are thinking about the places where AI needs to go, where you could use it to kind of expand your teaching and your pedagogy, and then like what could you do with AI to really, really create something wonderful, right? Um, if you haven't tried Claude Code, go vibe code a little bit, see what you can create. It's pretty fun. So my call for you all this semester is to think about that equation and what that looks like for you in the classroom. And feel free to reach out to me and share. I love to get ideas from you guys. I'm really grateful for our high school teachers and everything that you're doing for students in the classroom and everything you're doing to kind of preserve your own sanity in these times. So thanks, you guys. That's the presentation I have. And then I'm very open to questions or comments or ideas if you would like to share those as well. Dave, I don't know if we want to keep recording. We could probably stop for folks, but I'd love it if you all have this time blocked off, if you have questions or want to chat, that would be great. So thank you.